Perfect. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. We are back online and the YouTube is streaming. So we are going to continue where we left off. So Member Macaulay, you had a question, and we have Ryan and Roland online with us, and they could respond. So I can't remember whether it was Ryan or Roland. One of you had started to respond, so please go ahead. Oh, Member Macaulay, you want to say something? I think you finished your question and they heard your question.
Do you want me to repeat?
I believe your question was if we had any sort of correspondence with the neighbor to the east. Am I remembering that correctly?
I think my question is a little bit more. You are proposing a 0 setback from the property line. And you're asking us to approve a 0 setback from the rear property line versus 7.5 meters. So I'm
Correct. The zoning, if you go to, sorry to interject.
My concern was in looking at your plans that the adjacent property, adjacent to your rear lot line, is also on the lot line. And that will cause all sorts of problems when you get to construction. Have you had any discussion about that? I don't know whether the adjacent property is also proposing changes so that they no longer are sharing that 0 property line.
So
it may help, sorry, Ryan, to jump in. It may help to go to slide 8 in the deck that we gave you.
Yes.
The rear lot line is actually per the zoning bylaw definition is our east property line. It's actually the side property line when you view the development from Kingston Road. Kingston Road is the true front property line. Our understanding is that that the client has had discussions with the property owner immediately east of us. It's a rental building, 100% occupied. They are also currently on the property line. Building on a property line is a very common condition within the city of Toronto, and you're correct, there are complications in terms of constructing a building with a 0 lot line setback, but this is not uncommon for party wall conditions. So just to be clear, you can see the red is what the zoning bylaw says, that Courcelette would be our front property line, and our east property line would be the rear property line. This is incorrect. Common sense tells you that Kingston Road is our front property line, and we do provide the 7.5 meter setback from the rear from the south.
Okay, and my question still is, and you're acknowledging that it's a problem. My question
yes,
is,
it's a common issue in construction within the city of Toronto to work on the property line. It's complicated, but it's not uncommon. We do it all the time. And we have had discussion with the property owner immediately adjacent to us to discuss how that's going to happen.
okay, that was my main concern, is that because you're proposing to build on the property line, that will impact his existing building, which is also on the property line as shown on this plan. And I don't know whether your underground is also on 0 setback, or whether it's just the above ground. It's an issue that I wanted a bit more clarification on.
Okay, maybe it might help to clarify that it's not a party wall condition we're talking about here. So they are on their property and we are directly adjacent to them on our property. We are building below grade and above grade with the 0 lot line proposed. But there are commonly used construction techniques for that. So our shoring will come into play below the building to ensure that we'd have no impact on their structure.
Sorry, Roland, just to clarify, the underground parking garage is actually set back by almost a meter from the east property line.
Correct, but there'll be shoring.
Right.
It's set back to accommodate the shoring that occurs there.
And the above ground, will that, the above ground structures, again, taking a look at your plans, it's rather difficult to see. because you've got terraces and you've got balconies, will that actually touch the existing building of your neighbor?
No, there'll be a very limited construction tolerance in the range of 25 millimeters typically is what we see.
Okay. All right, as I said, this was the planners taking a look at this fairly detailed and complicated proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else had a question? Okay, I see none. All right, Ryan and Roland, thank you for your time. We'll come back to you once we've had a chance to listen to our speakers here. So moving to first speaker on the list, Howard and Sharon Wilson.
Through the chair, these people have not logged on today.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Howard and Sharon Wilson have not logged in. We'll move to the next speaker, John Hurdley. Okay, John, you're with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. It's a little muffled, but we can hear you.
Is that better?
Okay, you may have to speak a bit louder, but better, yes.
Is that better?
Perfect.
All right. I'm speaking on behalf of myself personally and on behalf of Lakeside Residents Association, which represents the interests of the community. We're incorporated and we're well funded. This committee's jurisdiction is with respect to minor variances. What they're asking you for is obviously not minor. Just looking through the list on the notice itself, there are 16 variances requested, starting with the height being 30% more, the floor area 13%, setbacks on Kingston Road. The angular planes are actually probably the most. Parking 73% short of what the bylaw requires. The driveways, as you've reflected, are not adequate. So, ignoring any one of those variations, the cumulative effect is way beyond that of a minor variance. This building is large. They patently ignored the provisions of the Birch Cliff area plan, which calls for streetscape improvements, including, and there's a large initiative to this point right now, about a bicycle lane, so that the driving lanes on Kingston Road can be improved. We have a huge safety problem with bicycle lanes. Once this building gets built, there will be no bicycle lane without removing the driving lane. The opportunity will be gone. The existing school is functioning at 130% capacity. 5 years ago, an addition was approved to that school. There has not even been an RFP, much less a contract, and of course, there's been no shovels in the ground. This building is the first building on Kingston Road between Henley Gardens and Rosetta McLean on the south side, in excess of 2.5 stories. That's a distance of 2.7 kilometers, according to Google. This building will set a precedent. The topography from Kingston Road falls sharply down to the lake, so that 8 stories on the south side of Kingston Road is more like 12 stories on the north side. So I'm suggesting to you that this application is totally inappropriate for a minor variance. You have expressed your own concerns, and I echo them. And perhaps I would refer you to the applicant's presentation regarding the angular plane. You can clearly see that this application violates primary official plan concerns regarding oversight and regarding transition. There's no problem building this building smaller. There is a problem building it the way they want to build it. Subject to any questions you might have, those are my objections.
Okay, thank you, John, for your time. Members of the committee, any questions for John? Okay, I see none. Well, thank you, John. We'll move to our next speaker. Bernadette Crowe.
Hello.
Hello, Bernadette.
Hi.
Hi.
Can I proceed?
Yeah, of course, please. You go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the city, the committee, the chairperson allowing me this opportunity to speak, and more importantly, I hope to be heard. I've never had to speak before a committee before. It is very overwhelming. I tried to keep my comments to the time allotted, but if I run over a bit, I hope you indulge me. I'm an owner of 191 Corselet Road, where we've lived for about 14 years, in the beach for 20. A single mother raising a daughter, a teenage daughter, and this is our home. It's a beautiful neighborhood with a beautiful community. I am south and stand to the neighbor most detrimentally impacted by this development. I stand here before you for my daughter and my community. I would like to talk briefly about the impact this has on my family's enjoyment. Oh my God. The street means a lot to me. My daughter went to school on the street as an obligation to my neighborhood. Building a condo will have a huge impact on our neighborhood. The scale of this development is so overwhelming. It highlights developers' greed and is not sympathetic with our community. More seriously, it affects my enjoyment of life, my home, my family, my community. We're discussing an 8-story proposal, but my home is about 3 meters downhill, so it's a 9-story proposal for me that aggressively exceeds the permissible zoning restrictions, is overbearing to me and the community south of it. I ask you try to put yourself in my shoes. This is my first chance to address this. My letter to committee speaks for itself. I thank you for taking the time to read it. Simply put, the design is too tall, too large, exceeds a 45-degree angular plane that's too aggressive an impact on our privacy, enjoyment of light and sky. Parking and traffic are inadequate. We fear congestion and, God forbid, accidents. The idea that visitors to the property seek out the green PM Blantyre is not realistic. The setbacks are set in place to lessen the impact on the neighboring properties are ignored. My home is immediately adjacent to the property. It is impacted. My understanding is that individually and taken together, the variances are not minor, warrant the process intended by a zoning bylaw amendment. The developer's drawings completely ignore the neighboring properties and the context of our neighborhood. I've attached 3 sketches that impact my home. If you can refer, that would be great. You can see my home looks like a peanut compared to the mammoth development that's going in. The blue lines on the section show greed, excessive mass, and loss of enjoyment of light and sky. The driveway, loading dock are located directly on access and T-bones into my home. The noise and headlights from the cars and trucks are pointed directly at my home. In green, the sketches show 1.5 landscape buffer strip that is required by the city. The plans ignore the requirement for a minimum of 1.5 landscape strip, show a token amount of landscape in the southeast corner, which offers no buffer. We have reached out to the developer, asked about privacy. His response will show plans but will not consult. And if there's damage, the condo corp will fix it. How is the city guarantee this? On the attached sketch, I've shown in green the landscape strip that is provided the developer's token gesture for a little landscape at the east end of our shared property boundary. If the trucks can't turn in, then the building needs to be a bit smaller. I asked the committee to preserve my entitlements to a proper 1.5 landscape buffer strip that shields me from headlights and noise from cars, trucks, visual screening, and provides privacy for my home, and provides a decorative fence to prevent trespass, and provides bollards to protect my home or property from damages from the cars and trucks that they may accidentally cause. The geotechnical report recommends tieback. I've learned these go into my house. Developer has not spoken to me about this. Who at the city is approving this on my land exceeds the permitted bylaw.
Bernadette, your time's up. Bernadette, your 5 minutes is up. If you don't mind, just close your remarks, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. You know what? You did have a very thorough letter that we have on file and we've read. So we totally understand and hear your concerns, but we have to respect everyone's time here as well. So we're good then?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, appreciate that. Any questions, committee members? Okay, see none. Well, thank you, Bernadette, for your time. We now move on to our next speaker, Brian Graff.
Through the chair, Brian has not logged in today.
Okay. We move to the next speaker, Michael Marmorio.
Madam Chairman?
Hi, Michael. You have 5 minutes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Michael Marmorio. I live at 51 Kildonan Drive in Scarborough, and I'm representing the Birchcliff Village Community Residents Association. And we have concerns about this building because it's the first building being built east of into our neighborhood over to the park. And given the variances requested by the builder, this doesn't feel like minor variance application. I mean, there's 18 of them, including the east side setback from 7.5 meters to 0, reduction in the required landscaping strip, piercing the angular plane, adding 2 additional stories, and then the driveway 4 meters for two-way driveway when the requirement is 3 meters per lane. And the lot is quite small, and at 8 stories, as far as we're concerned, it's too high, too dense for the neighborhood, and it's not in line with the Birchcliff revitalization plan. There is now a very large push across the city, and in particular along Kingston Road, to exceed height, density, angular plane setbacks. And we asked the committee to hold the line on the important height guidelines that have been established for the well-being of all the neighborhood, because all the people living on the south side of Kingston Road, when they see an 8-story building, it's going to be 11 stories high. And that's going to continue all the way across Kingston Road, right up to the point it joins to the end of Birchmount. So we'd like this the committee to refuse the amendments and send this back and get the proper zoning done to put up a building like this. And I appreciate the time of the committee, and I hope I made myself clear.
Thank you very much, Michael. Members of the committee, any question or comment? Okay, I see none. Thank you. All right, we move to the next speaker, Jeff Weiner. Jeff, you're with us? Okay, right. I was just, because Carrie said he was there, so I was just checking. He's not? Okay. All right. So Jeff, we're waiting. You're not there. So we're going to move on. Mark Kent.
I am here, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Mark. You have 5 minutes, and please go ahead.
Okay. No, I just want to say that this is. I'm not too sure how this can be deemed a minor variance with respect to the increase in the height. It goes from 6 stories to 8 stories, and in my books, that's 30% increase in size from a height perspective. This is a gargantuan style structure. It dwarfs anything in the area. And even the building next door to it, it's a 21-unit brownstone building that was constructed over 100 years ago. And it's 5 stories taller than this building. And this is the largest building in the area, except for the condominiums across the street. But that's a different situation because they're not at the top of the hill. So as has been pointed out, this 8-story structure will be like a 15-story structure, just even a few hundred meters down both Fallingbrook and the other adjacent street. So I very strongly recommend that this structure not be allowed to ruin the aesthetics and the enjoyment that everyone has in this neighborhood by putting such a, as I say, a large structure. Most people in the community that I've talked to have no issue with having the gas station turned into either stores, commercial property, or some townhouses or something. But this structure just does not, it's just not compatible. So I'd like to, as a resident, I would like to bring forth this strong request that something that is in keeping with the community and that people will like, not absolutely everyone dislikes this whole structure. So I guess at this point, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Members of the committee, any comment? Any question? Okay, see none. Thank you, Mark, for taking the time to speak with us. We now go to our next speaker, Patrick McGarry. And Patrick, you're with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can
All
you
right.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Patrick, please go ahead, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the members of the committee. I live at 150 Fallingbrook Road, which is the east border and south of the proposed condo. The size of this building is completely out of proportion with the area. It essentially closes off my western view from my backyard. I already submitted a letter outlining my argument how this doesn't meet the city's plan. Also, I have a 100-year-old maple in the backyard that is threatened by the construction that's planned here. So the urban forestry already at Toronto have submitted a recommendation to decline the variances because of, in part because of the possible loss of that tree and the lack of plantable land that the proposal allows. So the urban forestry needs mature trees to have a healthy biodiversity. They would lose a significant tree by the loss of that maple. So I do see though that I have a question because the Toronto Urban Forestry letter says that if you agree to let them go ahead with these variances, that they still are responsible to comply with the Toronto Green Standard. And I am at a loss as to how they could do that. So that is a question I leave you with. I am completely opposed. I echo all the concerns by my neighbors. This is inappropriate to the area and would only be a detriment.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Members, any questions for Patrick? Okay, that brings us to the end of our speakers list for this application. And we will now move to Ryan and Roland.
Sorry, through the chair, did you want to try and go back to Jeff to see if he has been able to connect on his audio?
Okay, we can try. Jeff?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay. All right, Jeff. So sorry about that you were experiencing some audio issues and we had to move on. But now that you're back, you can certainly voice and tell us what your concerns are. You have 5 minutes.
So I own the building that Anne Macaulay was asking about at 1165 Kingston Road. My building was built in the 1930s, and accessing the side of the building is a necessity. We do tuck pointing on the building on a very frequent basis. We do maintenance work. We're constantly upgrading the building, and there's been concerns, and I've hired an engineering firm in the past just to make sure that the building is stable, that because it's a 90-year-old building, that everything is properly done with the building and in compliance with all engineering requirements, et cetera. This building is going to be extremely close to my foundation, and I question the potential damage that can happen to the foundation of my building, no matter how careful they are. And we're not talking 5 feet, which is the required setback. They want to, the new building is going to nearly touch my building. So notwithstanding the cosmetic component of allowing for the 5 feet, including tree planting, landscaping, or lighting, or some type of pedestrian right of way between the building, there will be literally no room for me to ever address any issue with my building in the future once this building is built. So I've now gone to the significant expense of hiring my own structural engineering firm to document every single part of my building that's going to be facing that side of the building. But I asked an engineering firm, like, what's the potential damage to my building? And they said to me just the other day, very significant. I'm concerned that this building, if it's built this close to my building, could literally destroy my 90-year-old building. Without exaggeration, and I did speak to the architects and they were very respectful, but they didn't, and when they said, hey, yeah, this building is going to be like really close, I didn't realize how potentially dangerous this could be. There are apartments in my building and people who live there. So, the other concern, and that the engineers didn't address this with me, which came to my attention just today, actually, is there are, I think, 12 or something like that trees, mature trees, some of which are 70, 80 feet tall that are on my side of the property. And the arborist report, it's almost, I don't even know how to call it, but they're suggesting that all those trees be taken down, like on the Excel sheet that they have, trees numbers 20 to 28. The comment is remove them. And we're talking 70-foot trees. And in the column where it says health of tree, these are healthy trees that they're going to have to come onto my property to literally take down. When I bought the building in 2008, I spoke to the prior business owner, a building owner, about when we went through a walkthrough, and he said, these trees are the pride of our building. Some of them there were invasive species, one of two of them. Some of them were planted there, but they provide shade to the building in its entirety. Like, you're talking a whole line of 70-foot trees, and every single one of them says remove, remove, remove. That's like it's arrogant to come onto my property and remove the trees that are sitting on my property that the tenants actually use for personal enjoyment. So those are my two primary concerns.
Okay, great, thank you. I guess this was the last speaker. So that brings us to the end of the discussion. Let's go to Ryan and Roland.
Great, thank you. And I just want to say thank you to all the residents who voiced their concerns. Just going to try to respond to as many as the comments as we can. Firstly, I would just like to touch upon the comments related to our variances as minor. In our opinion, the variances are minor, seeing as the site has been identified for mid-rise mixed-use intensification as part of the Kingston Road revitalization study. A typical rezoning process would see a site that has permissions for 3 to 4 stories increased in height exponentially, whereas we are simply requesting for a 2-story increase in height in this location. The Birchcliff Kingston Road revitalization study, while it does identify our site as a 6-story site, it also specifies that 8 stories can be appropriate in certain locations. And as we have discussed through this presentation, we do have sign off from city planning through our many discussions with them that 8 stories is appropriate, and that our angular plane is appropriate. And then with respect to comments around parking and traffic, from my understanding, the city is currently going through a process of reducing its minimum parking standards, and the standards outlined in the Birchcliff bylaw would now be almost 11 years old and a bit out of date. We have a positive traffic report from our own consultants that show that our parking supply is sufficient and that there is sufficient surplus capacity in the area. And we also have ample bike parking in our building in excess of the bylaw requirements to promote active transportation. Just going through some of the other comments with respect to the neighbor immediately to the south, I understand that we're not providing that landscape buffer across the south lot line, but I just want to specify that a fence, as per building requirements, will be provided along the south lot line to protect for privacy and things like that. And then in terms of the trees and the comments regarding the loss of trees, I understand that is a concern. However, I just want to note that the large sugar maple tree that has been identified by several residents is proposed to be protected, as well as several other of the larger trees. And that many of the trees that are going to be removed, as per our arborist report, are within or immediately along the lot line, some of which are not completely accessible as they are currently. So Roland, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add on top of that.
No, Ryan, I think you've summarized it quite well. I mean, we are trying to do a mid-rise building within the envelope that the mid-rise guidelines would prescribe on a site such as this. We're trying to deal with the very difficult site geometry and slope of the site, replacing an existing gas station with a LEED Platinum industry-leading sustainable mid-rise development.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll get to the questions now. Member M.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I appreciate that from a height perspective, there is precedence in the area. We did have community planning, agree, because there are instances in the revitalization guidelines that say 8 stories is appropriate at certain locations. Where I question is this that certain location? And I think that this site is a little tight. We can't make direct comparisons to across the street at Ballantree and Kingston Road. They had a much larger site to work with. I feel like this site needs a little bit more breathing room, right? You said to me earlier that you can't provide the landscape buffer because it would impact your parking requirements. Well, your parking requirements would be less if your number of units were less. And if your number of units were less, that could give you a little bit more breathing room, both on the side facing the existing brownstone building, that from what we heard from the resident or the owner of that building, it requires regular maintenance. How is he supposed to maintain his pointing on his brickwork if he can't physically access that site with a ladder because there's a 0 lot line setback? I think that this is, like I said earlier, a little bit premature, given all of the input that we received from both the public and the adjacent owners who have true concerns with true impact to their property, their buildings. I really think that we cannot make a decision on this application because there's got to be some changes made to the design. I think that, if you were to scale it back in size, you need to rework your floor plans. You'll have to do a 3rd submission, but this is not uncommon. I just think that maybe 8 stories is really not achievable at this particular location, and that you need to rework your plans in order to give a little bit more breathing room surrounding you on the south and the east of this building. It's not the transition I have an issue with, right? Like, it is a very minor projection into the angular plane. What I have issue with is the separation distance at grade from both the south side as well as the east side lot line. And clearly that's an issue with planning staff as well, if they don't feel a 0.87 separation distance on the south side is appropriate, and they're asking for at least 1.5. And truth be told, a fence is not going to really help that southern neighbor. What would help is an increase in that separation distance. Thank you.
So if I understand you correctly, Member M, you don't have so you alluded to the height, but in reading community planning staff report, they didn't have a concern with the height of the building except the angular plane, right? And I totally see the setback or the separation distance. Just want to clarify that. But you have a concern with the height.
I don't have a concern with the height.
Okay.
All I'm suggesting is that they used parking as a rationale as to why they can't provide additional space. And I'm saying if you take out some of your GFA, that's going to bring down your parking requirement. So whether they take that out on height or what have you, that is going to give you the breathing room where you can lose additional car parking spaces because you're appropriately scaling the location and the position of this building to respond to some of these concerns that we heard, whether they do it in height or whether they do it other ways. I'm just saying, you know, yes, 8 stories is appropriate on Kingston Road at certain locations. And this location may just be a little too tight, in my opinion, because you're asking for a lot of density that requires a lot of parking, and you know you're asking for a lot, and it's kind of like a can't have your cake and eat it too situation.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Member Macaulay, you had your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yes, adding on to member M. Comments.
Member Macaulay,
Should not be set.
Member Macaulay, we could not hear
Yes?
you. We could not hear you. It was all choppy. You go ahead now.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
All right, I don't know what you what got cut out, so I'll start over again very quickly. I agree with a lot of the comments that member M is making here, and I want to add on to those comments that we're a committee of adjustment. We're dealing with minor variances. We should not be dealing with items that are setting precedents for the community. That is not the role of the committee. It's not the role of our variances. In this case, this building with of 8 stories is the first building on the south side of Kingston Road. I have a number of questions about that from a policy point of view. It changed from 6 stories to 8 stories, as I understand it, is because there are added benefits. We have another application where they are providing rental housing in order to be provided here, and that just adds to the fact that this should not be a variance application, or it needs a lot more work done before we are in a position to approve it. The second part I have, and I didn't have a problem initially with the setback from Kingston Road, but the applicants and the residents are quite correct. The city is trying to create another lane on Kingston Road to provide better parking, to provide better access, especially for bike lanes. If you are at 0 on Kingston Road, that opportunity is lost. The concern of the neighbor to the east and his apartment building really does raise a lot of concerns with me. He's got to be able to maintain that, or he's going to have a lot of problems. I think at the moment, this application as a variance application is premature. I would suggest that the applicant go back and deal with planning staff. Maybe 2 years isn't enough. Maybe 2.5 years is necessary. But you've got a very complicated site. It's going to take you a number of years to build it. Let's do it right.
Thank you, Member Macaulay.
That's the end of my comment.
Thank you, Member Macaulay. Any other comment? Okay, so Ryan and Roland, any closing remarks?
So I would just respond to the first comments by Member M by saying, you know, I do understand your comments about separation. I just want to clarify that to the south, we are providing a 7.5 meter setback, which is, if we are treating that as the rear lot line, then that is compliant with the separation provided in the bylaw. The 1.5 meter buffer would be within that setback. So it's not increasing the separation, it's just providing an additional buffer within that setback. To the east, as Roland mentioned when he was going through the presentation slides, you know, these sorts of conditions are provided all across the city on its main street avenues. What we're proposing here is not out of the ordinary in this respect. Just one last comment to clarify one of Member Macaulay's comments. We're not proposing a 0 meter setback on Kingston Road. We're proposing 2.5 meters at grade and 2 meters above grade. So, you know, even if we are bylaw compliant in terms of providing 3 meters, that's not going to really affect the additional streetscape improvements along in the roadway that you are referring to here. But anyways, I appreciate all of your comments so far. Roland, I'll leave it to you if you have any further comments to bring up as well.
No. I think we need to start closing now. We need to take the matter into committee for deliberation. We've spent a lot of time. I only asked for closing because there was a couple of things raised by Member Macaulay and Member M. So I would rather now go into committee and proceed with a decision on the application. Thank you, everyone, for your time. So we take the matter into committee now. Member M, go ahead, please. And again, if there are pressing comments, to make them, but if you're ready with a motion, please proceed.
I just wanted to say that I understand that the rear yard is the 7.5, but it's the separation to the transformer and the request from staff for that separation buffer to be 1.5 meter that I still take issue with. That being said, I want to understand from staff, we're not able to defer this because they specifically requested it not to be deferred and that we make a decision, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so basically to my fellow members, we either have to make a decision.
Yes.
And in the event I'm prepared for a motion of a refusal, I truly don't feel that right now in its current state, this meets the intent of the official plan and the zoning bylaw. I also feel that, you know, there could be significant changes to come as a result of their second submission. I mean, it's very rare that a site plan application gets approved after just one submission or two submissions. So I just think that this is overly premature for us to make a decision, and in its current state it doesn't feel minor to me, and that they need to do a little bit more work at massaging their design to actually come back with something that is ready for us to decide upon. And in this case, I do agree with Member Macaulay. I feel that this is more attuned to a zoning bylaw amendment. And with that, I'm putting forward a motion of refusal.
Thank you. We have a motion of refusal. Member Macaulay.
I will second that motion. I regret that we can't ask for a deferral because the applicant isn't agreeable to a deferral. Therefore, our only solution here, because we're not comfortable, is refusal.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of this motion? The motion's carried and the application has been refused. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Moving to the next item, item 12.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We move to the next item. I was held. It's the second last of the two that were held. 2448 and 2450 Kingston Road. This is an application, and we have Finley McEwen as the applicant or the agent. You with us, Finley?
Yes, I am, and if possible, Sean McGaffey is asked to present for the applicant. He's also available online.
He's the applicant or the owner?
So I'm the applicant. Sean McGaffey is the planner representing the applicant. We had some difficulties logging in,
Okay.
and he is registered as a participant, and he would speak on my behalf.
Through the chair, we don't have any request for this person as a registered speaker on our list.
Yes, that's why I'm a little confused here. Okay, well, but we can allow one person to speak, right? So it's either Finley or Finley's representative planner?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. So Finley, you can
Okay,
step
so-
aside and we can have your planner speak.
If through the
Mike,
chair, can
that-
the person who's speaking list their name
Yeah.
their name and address, please. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so, Mr. Planner,
Yep.
if you can give your name and address.
Hi, good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Sean McGaffey. As Finley noted, I'm the planner assisting with this application and another one that you would have considered at the last hearing at 2380. For the record, my name is Sean McGaffey, spelled McGaffey, and I reside at 15 Roehampton Avenue in the city of Toronto.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So as I alluded to, this application is sort of tied to the one that you've heard previously at 2380 Kingston Road. When I made my presentation to you members, I noted that you would be hearing a forthcoming application on this site. So I'm pleased to have that before you today. We have been working with staff back and forth on the site plan control application associated with this file. They are comfortable that we are now at a point where that 2380 Kingston Road has been approved, the notice of final and binding has been received, and the rental housing demolition component of this application is on the Scarborough Community Council agenda for their next meeting to be hopefully before the Council of the City of Toronto in December. I have had the opportunity to review some of the correspondence submitted on this matter, and just, you know, there was an issue where the incorrect notice was sent out initially, which incorrectly identified a variance to permit 8 stories. That is not the case with this application. That variance has been correctly removed from the revised notice. 8 stories is permitted on this property in accordance with the zoning bylaw and the Section 37 provisions that will be entered into by my client. So that touches on the height aspect. I have had the opportunity to review the presentation materials also submitted by the members of the public, which specifically deal with the side yard setbacks of the 7th and 8th floors. The bylaw would speak to 5.5 meters for these. We are seeking a variance for both the north and south side yard setbacks. And we have worked with staff in developing this built form. It involved the development and the review of a block context plan to understand adjacent development context and whether there would be any potential impacts. And to that end, neither adjacent landowner is in opposition to what's currently proposed before you today. Working with city planning staff and to be secured through the site plan control application, there's limited glazing and on each of those upper stories to reduce the potential for impact, and to further mitigate the potential, the orientation and selection of rooms on the outer wall further provides sort of main windows. I would classify them as facing the adjacent properties. This further mitigates the potential for impact. With respect to light and privacy from these 2 variances, a shadow study has been prepared in conjunction with the block context plan and reviewed by staff as part of the SPA application. And I mentioned that, you know, we're at a position now where we're comfortable and they're comfortable proceeding with this application. In terms of the parking, which is also noted, what you're seeing is a variance for 2 spaces, and in their transportation staff report, they note that if this site was subject to 569/2013, there would in fact be no variance associated with parking. The requirement would be 39, and we're providing 40. So to me, this is a relatively minor ask and is appropriately dealt with. So with that, I would just like to close that, in my opinion, and as I've reviewed the application through the city planning process so far, it maintains the intent and purpose of the official plan, including section 4.5.2 of the development criteria. It's within a mixed-use area along a designated avenue where this sort of development is permitted. There is no official plan amendment or rezoning required, as alluded to in some of the correspondence. It maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw by appropriately mitigating conditions that could be risen through the approval of such variances. These have all been accounted for. There is no height variance nor density variance associated with this application. And the angular plane encroachments are very minor and related to the extent of parapet walls along the back. It's appropriate and desirable for the use of the land, given that this is a council adopted plan for this corridor that is being implemented by this proposal with appropriate suitable tweaks. And it's minor in nature, as this proposal and the built form associated with it is generally consistent with what council has planned for this corridor in terms of encouraging an urban transit supportive built form. One final thing to touch on is the bump out along Kingston Road that you'll see referenced. That bump out has been provided in consultation with urban design and transportation staff. And what it allows for is suitable tree planting along Kingston Road, as well as a wider and enhanced pedestrian environment. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Sean. Your 5 minutes is up. And I think you had wrapped it up anyways. Okay, members of the committee, any questions for Sean? Okay, Member Macaulay first, and then Member Said second. Member Macaulay. Yes, Member Macaulay. Oh, she's stuck. She's frozen. Okay, we'll give Member Macaulay.
Hear me?
No. Okay. Now go ahead. Please start, Member Macaulay.
She appears frozen again. It's got to be her bandwidth.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but then you disappear. So we'll give you another try. If not, then we'll have to come back to you later on.
Go to the other one.
Okay,
first,
all right.
and I'll come back.
So we'll go to Member Said. You fix your bandwidth, try to at least, and then we'll come to you. Member Said, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Sean, for the presentation. I don't see there is any complications over here. The question I'm asking is just for further clarity. The parking variance, again, it's not bigger. I understand that. It's very minor.
Yes.
But my concern was that the parking is not allowed in the basement, right? Just from my understanding, could you just give us a breakup? How many parkings are there in the basement and how many parkings are there on the surface?
Yes, of course. Let me just pull up my plans here in front of me.
Yes,
so
correct.
at the
It is
rear,
a bandwidth that tells me I've got a problem.
Member Macaulay, could you please
comes-
wait? You need to wait. We are proceeding with Member Said, so you may want to wait for a few minutes, okay? Okay, carry on, Sean.
okay, so there are a total of 4 parking spaces provided off the laneway at the surface. These are for visitor and the non-residential component, as well as the accessible parking space at grade. So it's, easily accessible to the lobby for drop-off. And the remainder of the parking would be provided below grade.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Member Macaulay, are you back? Okay, Member Macaulay has disappeared. We'll come back to her later on. All right, let's proceed with our first speaker then on the list. John Hurdley. Okay, John.
Yes, thank you. Again, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
I'm going to be very brief. This is just one more example of buildings that are actually circumventing the planning process by applying to the Committee of Adjustment. These buildings are too big. They need consideration of engineering issues. They need consideration of the school capacity issues. They need consideration of the street issues or transportation issues. And by going to the Committee of Adjustment and seeking so-called minor variances, they are circumventing those processes. That is not good planning. So I urge you not to allow your jurisdiction to be abused. Those are my submissions. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for your brief presentation. Members of the committee, any questions for John? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go to the next speaker, Janet. Sorry, no, the first speaker, Tanya Baksh. Hello, Tanya.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead, and you have 5 minutes.
Perfect. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Tanya Baksh, and I reside at 214 Oak Ridge Drive. I am a member of the Cliffcrest Scarborough Village Southwest Residents Association Planning and Development Committee. My family and I frequent this area of Kingston Road to enjoy the various restaurants, and for several years, my children have some of their extracurricular activities a few times a week right in this immediate area. We as an organization have an interest in the future development of Kingston Road as it stretches through Scarborough. We also have been invited by members of this immediate community to speak on their behalf as they have no residents association. Could you please bring up our first slide from our residents association presentation? We are here to ask the COA to refuse just one of the 7 requested variances. Variance number 4 that includes the proposed side yard setbacks above the 6th story that are less than half of the minimum permitted side yard setbacks of a minimum of 5.5 meters. These side yard setbacks above the 6th story are not minor and not desirable. Our request today has some important context and background. Last month, over 40 neighbors signed a petition to oppose the request for variances for the development at 2380 to 2382 Kingston Road. Some of those neighbors reached out to us and we provided them some last-minute advice. The immediate neighbors were very disappointed that not one of the variances were refused at last month's COA hearing. There are already parking issues and limited traffic space on Sandown Lane. This proposed development being heard today will only exacerbate the issue for our neighbors. As you have seen in this application file, there were immediate neighbors that once again have submitted letters of objection against this development, but due to personal commitments, they are unable to speak today. Most residents aren't aware of the level of change coming to Kingston Road over the next decade and what the cumulative effects will be as lot after lot is replaced by high-density condos. We join our neighbors and respectfully ask the Committee of Adjustment to refuse variance number 4 with the minimum set yard setbacks above the 6th story for this proposed development. Can you please pull up slide number 2 from our Residents Association presentation? Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. Any questions for Tanya? Okay, I see none. Our second speaker, Janet May, please.
Janet will not be speaking today.
Okay, Janet will not be speaking today. Third speaker, Tom Casanda.
Hi, hello. Hi, it's Tom Casanda. I'm president of the Cliffcrest Scarborough Village Residents Association. I'd like to point out here in this slide that it is not difficult to build within the bylaws. It actually is a conscious decision by developers to ignore the bylaws for their own benefit and profit, often, as here, to the detriment of the neighbors. Slide 3. If we move to slide 3, although these variances are easily avoidable, it is clear that these are minor because the arrows were actually needed to draw attention to them. We could go to slide 4. The community issue is with the variance for side yard setback on the 7th and 8th floor. The intent of the setback above the 6 stories is to somewhat minimize the negative aspect of the 8-story street walls evolving as property after property is redeveloped for condos along this segment. We will show the requested variance is neither minor nor desirable to the community. Slide 5 shows the required setbacks. And it's pretty clear that it's not minor. Slide 6 shows the impact this variance will have, especially in the future developments that will follow. And what's important to recognize here is that this is a view from across the road. So it's one particular view. But if you are approaching along the sidewalk, you have even more impact as that side yard setback moves out. Okay. So if we go to slide 7, we show that the proportions of the variance on the 7th floor. And you can see here that almost as much is red as there is green. Correcting this isn't difficult, as we illustrate in the diagram right to the side, because here we show what a minor variance is. And it could be just for the elevator shaft and the hallway that would be an actual minor variance. So if you refuse this variance, you could allow a smaller variance, and it wouldn't be very difficult for the developer to make this change, and they could proceed with their building, and the community would be happy with that. If we go to slide 8, the principle here is that developers should not be permitted to use variances to city-established best practice to pursue a greater number of units to increase their profits to the detriment of the street wall, especially when the intent does not fulfill other municipal objectives like providing affordable housing for the community. More penthouses are not affordable housing. Now, I've heard applicants to other files talk about how difficult it is with small sites and the compromises they have to make. And this makes no sense, because it's only difficult if one's intent is to ignore the bylaws, treat them as arbitrary, and drive towards building the biggest possible building that can be got away with. Why not just use the bylaws as building criteria, as I illustrated in slide 2? The mid-rise study does not insist on building the largest building possible. In fact, the primary issue for the mid-rise study shows a modest building that does not need variances. Okay, so if we go to slide 9, we'll just reiterate here that the other variances are minor, and we don't have any objection to them. The greater than 50% reduction in side setback is not minor or desirable, or in keeping with the performance standard designated in the Avenue study. Now, the Avenue study was developed in theory in conjunction with the community, although I think a lot of neighbors probably never knew anything about it, and now that they know, they're probably freaking out. But it doesn't comply with that, and this variance therefore does not meet the 4 tests. This one particular variance does not meet the 4 tests and should be refused. And if we just go on to slide 10, slide 10 again shows that is what a minor variance looks like, and this would be fine. Let's just adjust to, let's not, if we refuse the major variance they're asking for, allow them a small minor variance so they can basically continue with this building and we can move on. So again, we ask you to refuse just the side yard setback variance because it affects the future street wall. Kingston Road is starting to be closed in as condos go from, there'll be condos across the road, they'll be lining the street, and by extending this and setting this as a precedent, we'll have actually a street wall of a full 8-story street wall instead of a 6-story street wall. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for your time. Members of the committee, any question? See none. Okay, all right. There is? Oh, member Said, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you have a question for the speaker, or do you have a comment?
Yes, I have a question.
For the speaker. Okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kasanda, what I am getting from your presentation is that the variance number 4 is the specific variance. You have the issues with that. So am I correct by saying that you are okay with the rest of the variances?
Yes, the other variances, although the other variances I accept as minor, it would be very difficult to make a case for them. We're just focusing on what isn't minor. And this particular variance is not minor, and it's not necessary. It basically starts to stretch that 8th floor, and it's not consistent with what the city guidelines suggest. When they did the avenue study, they said, yes, you can go up, with the section 37, you can go up an additional 2 floors, but you need this side yard setback at that level. And they didn't make that up arbitrarily. It wasn't like, oh, let's just stick this in. There was a reason for it. And the reason was, and if you look at slide 6 again, you can see that there is a difference in the sky space depending on how wide that 7th and 8th floor are. Now, the thing is, as is in the previous situation, there's what's allowed, and people are frustrated with what's allowed, but we accept that that's allowed. But when developers decide, well, we want even more than is allowed because we can ask for it, that's where the neighborhood says, no, yeah, you are allowed to ask for minor variances, but those minor variances can't affect us. They can't hurt us. And, we're speaking up for the community because, again, this illustration just shows 2, okay? But what happens when it's the entire block? And it just brings, by having this particular variance allowed, it starts to add to a full 8th floor street wall. And it's not necessary. It's not minor. Sorry.
How wide is
And
Kingston Road?
necessary. Pardon?
How wide is Kingston Road? How many lanes each way?
At this particular place,
Mm-hmm.
at this particular place, I believe it's 3 lanes wide. But the experience as you walk along the sidewalk, there are so many other issues we could discuss in terms of problems, but they aren't, they're not to do with variances. But the bump out, which is nice, they're putting in there's some space for trees, but they're taking away parking, as opposed to moving their building back a little bit and providing that. Because the development mentality is we've got to put the biggest possible thing we can get away with. That isn't necessarily in the long run good for this segment of the street.
Okay.
There's nothing that says you can't do something a little more modest.
Got it. Okay.
And what we have as a defense is don't accept things that are not minor variances. So that's what we're asking for.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cassandra. You provided us with the response. Member Said, are we satisfied, and can we move on, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Cassandra, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll go to Sean McGaffey now. No, sorry, my apologies. We still have one more resident left. Rob and Step Bazzo.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, we can certainly hear you, Rob. Please go ahead, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Robert Bazzo, and I'm a stakeholder situated on the lands at 2446 Kingston Road, immediately to the west of the proposed development. May I request you to share to the screen page 17 of the September 1st traffic addendum, please?
Sure, just give a moment. Staff will pull it up.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I care to address the memorandum sent to you by Transportation Services dated on the 4th of November.
Yes.
It concludes no objection to variance number 8 and cites their acceptance of parking provisions in bylaw 569-2013 on the basis of recent development projects.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, this application is linked to the application over at 2380. Transportation Services had similarly advised the committee on parking provisions on that related development project, also by way of memorandum dated on the 15th of October. And as you know, that parking variance was granted. In that memorandum, Transportation Services relies on a transportation operations assessment prepared by the applicant's consultant, WSP.
Mm-hmm.
The applicant sought a variance for the parking provisions at 2380 because there was a deficiency of 31 spaces and Transportation Services did not object on the basis of becoming satisfied with a cross-reference site plan control application. Finley or Sean, how does this cross-reference relate to 2450? So you see, Madam Chair, that traffic operations assessment was very instrumental in that sister application becoming approved. Now, over here at 2450, the applicant's consultant, which was BA Group, prepared a response to Transportation Services to justify parking conditions in our area. Transportation Services are relying on a parking demand study to suggest there is ample lay-by parking along Kingston Road, which, in my opinion, there is not, at least not in the way the available parking is being used by the community. Now, looking at page 17 of this parking demand study, it is immediately...
Okay, well, wait a minute. They haven't got the right one up.
Well, but we still have the memo in front of us, so we're following you.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, looking at page 17 of this parking demand study,
Mhm.
it is immediately evident how less than 20% of Southside parking is used, and how precisely, and now precisely 0 spaces opposite us and the future development at 2450 are being used. That amounts to 15 unused yet available parking spaces. Now, I took the time to repeat that parking demand study last week and shared that with you in my materials. That data verifies how parking is at capacity far too often on the north side. The difference between last week and late March, when BA Group did their collection of data, is the fact that non-essential businesses are not in lockdown anymore, meaning as the 39 businesses on the north side begin operating again, the available lay-by parking will become even more inadequate. I'll also add that BA Group's data shows only 17 out of 39 businesses were open. Now, if BA Group's study is to be relied on or accepted by Transportation Services, it appears to me that the parking supply amounts to 118 spaces, of which you can see here that 50 are on the south side and are not being used. You see, Madam Chair, with 118 lay-by spaces available to the community, it may be possible for area merchants to survive in this already dire period of economic downturn and business closures. If and only if Southside parking is promoted by the city. Southside parking is vital.
Rob, I hate to interject here, but your time's up, so you may want to just offer a couple of remarks, closing remarks.
I just have one closing remark, and that is the Southside parking is vital to economic development, and it is up to Transportation Services to become satisfied with the parking supply and do their part in promoting it, whatever that may be, crosswalks or marking of the street. Anyways, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for providing such a thorough analysis of the report. We're not traffic experts here, but we certainly have heard your comments and concerns. We'll certainly go back to Sean McGaffey now, I guess. We've gone through the list. Going back to Sean now. And Sean, hope you've made some good notes on the comments and concerns raised, and also traffic. So do you mind shedding light and providing a response to those concerns, please? We have 5 minutes.
Yes, of course, Madam Chair. I'll first touch on the jurisdictional question that was raised about whether the committee has jurisdiction to consider this application. This application has been reviewed extensively by city planning staff. It has gone through multiple reviews. There is no amendment to the official plan required here. There is no rezoning required to permit the use or the building height or the density or the parking. This is a question or an application that is fully within the purview of the Committee of Adjustment, in my opinion, and I share that with city planning staff. With respect to the side yard step backs at the 7th and 8th floor, I appreciate the materials that have been filed by the residents, and I would turn your attention to page 5 of the city planning staff report, where again, this has been reviewed through a block context plan as part of the site plan review application, with the accompanying shadow impact studies that demonstrate there is no impact with respect to light, view, or privacy from the public realm or on adjacent residential properties. In fact, before 11:18 a.m., there is no shadow provided for on any of the neighborhood's designated properties on the opposite side of the lane. And as city planning staff note that there is a goal to balance these requirements. Yes, the bylaw says thou shalt be 5.5 meters, but there is a process in the planning regime of things, such as what's being considered today, to modify these standards and to assess the potential for impact. The city has a number of priorities which encourage larger dwelling units. They encourage communal outdoor amenity space, and in fact, on a number of my files that I attend to across the city, we constantly hear direction from city planning staff to make available rooftop amenity space, which is what's been done here and is what is driving some of what you see on the 7th and 8th floor, particularly the 8th where the corridor is. We have stepped the building back above the 7th floor substantially to provide for this common outdoor amenity terrace in excess of what the typical 3-meter stepping would be. It's stepped back 4.3 meters from their from the rear extent of the 7th floor. And like I said, these units on the 7th and 8th floor have direct regard to the city's growing up guidelines in terms of unit sizes. They provide for minimum unit sizes of 80 to 101 square meters for 2-bedroom and 2-bedroom plus den units. Anyone familiar with the growing up guidelines, recognizes that it's often quite challenging to implement those sizes, and part of that is because of a resulting built form that needs to be modified with an appropriate standard. So, in my opinion, and working with this application, we recognize that the variances that are being asked for at the 7th and 8th floor are less than the 5.5 meters that is typically identified in the performance standards. However, you need to consider the mitigating aspects of the orientation of windows at those upper stories, the impact of the negligible impact of shadows resulting from that area up there, and as well the need to provide larger family-oriented dwelling units. So with that, I submit that these variances are minor. They are desirable for the appropriate development of this land. And then just to clarify one last item, there was a question regarding the extent of Kingston Road in this area, and it was identified at 3 lanes. Just to correct the record, it's 3 lanes in each direction. So we're talking about 6 lanes of traffic, plus a median, plus a lane of parking, plus boulevard on each side for an approximate right-of-way width that I dimensioned just now at 37.6 meters based on the city's mapping. This is a large thoroughfare through the city. It is intended to be modernized as development applications come in, like you're seeing with the bump out and the new tree plantings, and with appropriately scaled buildings, which in this case is 8 stories as identified in the zoning.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, Sean. Member M, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Half of me does agree with the agent, but then the other half of me does take slight issue with variance number 4. For one thing, that is the main difference between the application we heard last month and what we have before us today. And I mean, it's as a result of a direct like avenue study And avenue studies have very specific design criteria that are put into place to achieve a certain intention. And that intention is not just sunlight, but just visibility through, massive street walls. And now that I've heard the agent say it is to accommodate larger units for the growing up initiative, which I do support, I'm wondering whether those larger units, do they have to only be on the 7th and 8th floor? Can they not be peppered throughout the entire building to allow a little bit more of that stepping to occur on the 7th and 8th floor to maintain the intent of that avenue study, which is essentially like a secondary plan level of study that's at the official plan level, not the zoning bylaw level. Like, it came in as an avenue study, and then this site specific bylaw came in to implement it. And so I do have some concerns with variance number 4. And I think that the community has been very reasonable in terms of accepting all the other variances here, even though, they are a little bit concerned with the amount of intensification that's occurring on Kingston Road. But it is, like you said, a major thoroughfare that needs modernization. But I think that their request to maintain the stepping for variance 4 is a reasonable request, which I feel could be addressed through the applicant.
Sean, would you like to respond, please?
Yeah, I hear what Ms. M is saying with respect to the redistribution of units. However, if you refer to the architectural plans as part of the SPA process here, the reality is that the 7th and 8th floor are extremely limited in terms of their actual size and in terms of balancing what city planning would like to see happen up there. There is a desire to provide accessible elevator access to an outdoor amenity space at the 7th and 8th floors. As you see, even in Mr. Kenson's presentation, the elevator core and the stair corridor encroach into that 5-meter area on their own. So, like, I hear what everyone is saying in terms of these setbacks and how they arrive from an avenue study. These are setbacks that are reflected in the avenue performance standard guidelines, the mid-rise building performance standard guidelines applicable across the city. And the intent of them is the light, view, and privacy in the view from the public realm, which I have to say, it's been studied with city planning through a block context planning exercise. We've had consultations with adjacent neighbors, both who you've heard from one today, who are not in opposition to this file. There's negligible impact on the perception from the public realm that 7th and 8th floor is set back in excess of 5 meters from the street line.
I'm just going to stop you there. I think it's going to just be the point that I just don't agree, unfortunately, except for the fact of the elevator. I mean, what we would need to be able to do is allow that elevator access, but to have it extended, have that variance apply to both sides, east and west, on both floors, I'm just not supportive of. I would be able to be supportive of modifying variance 4 just to say only applicable to the elevator shaft. But in excess of that elevator shaft, I do feel it's not in the intent of the area specific plan, right, or the avenue plan. And I know you're quoting the mid-rise building guidelines that are applicable all throughout the city, but this plan was specifically derived to look at this segment of Kingston Road and has very specific intentions for this particular area. And I feel like it would fail actually on the test of the OP, because that is a plan that is now wrapped into the OP. So I just don't feel comfortable with item 4. I am completely appreciative of all the other parking requirements, as I do feel that it maintains the intent of the newer parking requirements under the newer bylaw. But it's just for me, item number 4 is a little bit of a sticky point.
Okay, thank you, Member M. Thank you, Member M. I think
Sorry,
you.
if I can just clarify one thing from Ms. M's point, I understand, and if there is a desire to modify variance 4, to permit the elevator encroachment. I would also ask that it be include a provision for the corridor encroachment that is required for elevator access.
I'm
That's
agreeable to that. Thank you.
So I'm not clear on how that would affect the actual variance then.
It would basically be that variance 4 only apply to the corridor and the elevator shaft on the levels above the 6th story.
Okay, so if so I'm going to the wording of the variance now, okay?
If I may, Madam Chair, I could suggest that it would be worded so as to say on variance 4, the proposed side yard setback of the east side building portion above 6 stories is 2.4 meters. I would advise that it could be reworded, in my opinion, to say the proposed side yard setback of the elevator and corridor above 6 stories shall be 2.4 meters, or a version that thereof.
So on a plan, if I'm looking at the floor plan, how is that? Because remember, once we start toying around with this, we start affecting the built form as well, right? And that built form has been analyzed thoroughly by community planning, so we don't want to tinker that as well, right? Because it's built form at the end of the day that we're trying to achieve in terms of, you know, the appropriateness of it. So I just want to make sure that from a design perspective.
Chair, it will not. From a design perspective, they will have to update their plans, but it won't change their overall built form. It will just mean that on the 7th and 8th floor, it will look like Tom Cassanda's images where they've just removed the red areas. So it's just the floor plans of the 7th and 8th floor that would have to change, and it doesn't really they can still proceed with their building permit once they update their drawings. They're just receiving relief on the side yard setback on just the east side corridor and elevator shaft. The built form basically is going to reflect the drawings that Tom Cassanda had in his.
On the east side, but what about the variance on the west side then? There's a variance for the west as well, right?
It does not. I'm saying that variance goes away. The only variance that I'm suggesting that seems agreeable by the applicant is that we allow the projection of the elevator shaft and the corridor into this required 5-point-whatever meter setback only for those components, and everything else must comply.
I'm not sure, Amy, if I agree with this rejigging of the design. In my opinion, it'll, like, just from an architectural design perspective, it's gonna start looking a little skewed here. That's just a very high-level, quick thought. Before we proceed, staff, you want to say something?
Through the chair, community planning has submitted a staff report indicating they are okay with the step backs, with the angular planes, and this is going through a site plan review process. These matters through the site plan process will be tied to plans. There'll be a full set of plans that get approved as part of the notice of approval conditions.
Yeah, and this is why I'm a little skeptical of making these architectural design changes on the fly. Maybe I'm not reading it comprehensively, but I can't, to me, this could skew.
The site plan is still active, guys. The site plan is still active. It hasn't been approved. Therefore, there is the ability to make the changes. I appreciate that we may have differences in opinion on what the design looks like aesthetically, but this was the guidelines as per the Avenue study. They are able to easily send in new drawings for the 7th and 8th floor. This is not like retroactively coming back to an approved site plan. This is to allow it to proceed. And so for it to move forward, I'm suggesting these changes. We don't have to agree, but I just think that the request of the projection of the entire 7th and 8th floor into this 5.5 meters stepping is inappropriate, in my opinion.
Okay, all right, you have your opinion, and certainly each member will have their opinion as well. Member Macaulay.
Thank you. I agree with Amy. What I saw in the drawings that the community was providing was a very good example of taking a process and applying it to a particular site. And then what you do is you modify it so that it is appropriate to that site. The changes are minimal. The applicant appears to agree with the changes as long as the elevator and the corridor is provided. I think this is a win-win.
Just, so if I may, my preference is obviously for what was submitted. If a change is required to variance 4 to secure approval of the committee today, I am comfortable with the wording suggested by Amy, but only in such that it is required today to make a decision. It's still my opinion that the
I know
proposal.
that you are seeking the full relief and that's why you've applied for it. I'm trying to balance what I'm hearing from the community as well as from staff and what I've seen. And yes, staff are okay with it, but at the same time, I still feel that little exceptions can be made to the betterment of your neighbors. And they're asking a reasonable request. And it's something that can be accommodated, which you have said it can be, even though your preference is to not. I see this as the right sort of good neighbor thing to do and come to sort of like a mediated agreement.
Okay, so I just need confirmation now. Before we go into committee, I don't want to have any confusion lying around there. So if we were to go with, if should the committee go with this direction, the change to the variance would be for the, for variance number 4, it would be the proposed side yard setback of each side building portion above 6 stories is 2.4 meters for the corridor and the elevator shaft only.
Correct.
And then the second part is removed,
deleted.
is eliminated. So basically, so you're saying that the building will have to be reduced. So essentially, the floor plate of the 7th and the 8th story would be reduced.
Sorry, and I have one final comment. Is just I brought up the corridor earlier, but if we can include mechanical in that as well, because there's mechanical on top of that elevator corridor, and I don't want any permit issues.
Understood. Yeah. I see this as no different as when we limit like an extension to a building to the first story only, right? Where we're allowing something, but we're limiting it to what it can be applied for.
Okay, we take the wording is on the screen.
So I'm prepared to put forward a motion, Madam
Before
Chair,
we do, I have not taken the matter into committee. Just give me a moment. We need to finalize the wording here. The proposed side yard setback of east side building portion above 6 stories is 2.4 meters and shall only apply to the elevator shaft, mechanical equipment, and corridor. Are we in agreement? I didn't hear anything, so I guess silence is agreement.
It's agreed, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, now we take the matter into committee. Thanks everyone for their participation and deliberation. I just want to make a quick comment that,
screen so I can read it.
Sorry?
Katrine, can you keep that on the screen so I can read it when I give my motion, please?
So I just wanted to just give my 2 cents on it from a purely variance, from a purely design and variance perspective. I didn't feel the need to remove that. The overall, we're not looking at floor by floor, we're looking at the overall built form as well. Yes, the avenue guidelines did provide that direction, and there's certain standards and criteria, but each case has to be looked at specifically, and it also depends on the lot area, on the proposed and the overall built form. In my opinion, that's very personal opinion of mine, that this may start to make the design look a little skewed, But again, we're not here to focus on the architectural design, we're here to look at the variances itself. I respect everyone's position here, but in my opinion, that increase was not really affecting any or causing any adverse impact on anything. There were no shadows created as a result of that. It was the width of the road, Kingston Road, with a 6-lane cross-section and the boulevard and the median was, I would say, roughly, in my head, I'm thinking 36 to 40 meters, was more than enough for a building of that height to go in with that type of floor plate. But that's my personal opinion. I am happy that, we reached a consensus which is agreeable to everyone, including the applicant and the residents. So I respect that and I'm happy, but personally, I didn't feel any issue with that variance before us today. Having said that, we have to move forward. We have to be cognizant of the time. So Member M, I would like to have a motion if you're ready with it. Please go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, I put forward a motion of approval of variance number, well, I guess it's one's crossed out, of all the variances except for we are amending variance number 4 to read as the proposed side yard setback of the east side building portion above 6 stories is 2.4 meters and shall only apply to the elevator shaft, mechanical equipment, and corridor. And I believe there are community planning conditions related to the off-site replacement housing units. And I think that is the only set of conditions.
Yeah, I would just say, because it's more than just off-site, I would just say the 6 conditions listed in the community planning staff report.
Okay.
Okay, so you're subject to, you're recommending approval, subject to the conditions of community planning staff report. Were there any, just confirming, was there anything from urban forestry?
No.
Okay, all right. So now can I have a seconder? Member Macaulay.
I second that motion.
All right, and did we capture that it's as amended? Okay, all in favor of this motion? The motion's carried and the application's been approved, subject to conditions of community planning staff report. Thank you.
And the amended variance number 4.
Yeah, as amended, yes. The application as amended. Okay. We now go to our last item that was held during the morning session. That is 18 Progress Avenue. And it was held because we had a community planning staff report recommending refusal. So that's why I wanted to give an opportunity to the applicant. Can we have Mohammed Latif, please? Sorry, was it not? Yes, it was item 13.
Sorry, through the chair, if you can just give me a moment. They were on line 17, but that has changed now. Just 1 second, please.
Okay.
Through the chair, as I stated, they were online. However, I do not see them right now.
So we don't have the agent. We held it down because to discuss it with the agent. How do we deal with it, staff?
So just want to confirm that for item 13, the agent is not logged in.
That is correct. That's what staff tell me.
Actually, Carrie, is the agent still not logged in?
No, he's not. He was earlier, but he no longer is.
Okay, so given that this does have a refusal report, my recommendation is you should probably defer the application to allow the applicant an opportunity to speak.
Can I make another suggestion? We still have a hearing ongoing, although this was scheduled for the morning session. Would it have any effect of, sorry, would it be of any, would there be any issue if you were to sort of park it at the end of the agenda, at the end of the hearing and see, just to give a chance? I'm just asking, and again, I don't know the admin side of it.
Through the chair, this has been, the time for this was the AM time slot.
Okay.
So it should be heard in the first time slot.
Sorry, through the chair, I do have somebody with the same first name but different last name, and I don't see that coming up on our list. Can I just go to them to see if it is that person?
Please.
Thanks. Hello, Mohammed? Hello, Mohammed? Are you there?
Hello?
Hi, Mohammed.
Catherine?
Are you here for item 13, 18 Progress Avenue?
Yes. Yes. Do you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we just had your name listed. Last name is different than what I'm showing on my screen.
Ah, okay. Okay. Sorry for that.
No, so can I have
Yeah,
your can you have your full name, please?
Mohammed Abdul Latif.
Muhammad Abdul Latif. Okay. All right.
Right.
All right.
I
So
was there since morning, yeah.
okay, no. That's why we wanted to make sure that we checked. Okay, so Mohammed, we have you here, and this is the application for 18 Progress Avenue. We received your application, we reviewed it. We also received a community planning staff report recommending refusal of the application. So as practice, we allow the applicant to come and advise us on your position and sort of defend your application. So here you are. So you have 5 minutes. So please go ahead and tell us what your thoughts are on the application and your thoughts on communities planning's recommendation.
Okay. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Good afternoon, committee members and chair. I'm coming to speak today about our submission for 18 Progress Road. I would like already to explain that our submission, there is a confusion already when we submitted already this project from the beginning, because the submission, we are trying already to give the idea that this submission for a community center is not a place of worship. It's existing use of this building, which is located in 18 Progress. It's a place of worship, and the area for the prayer, actually, it's around 930 square meters. We are proposing already to add a second floor to the building. And actually, it's not increasing the prayer area as a place of worship. We would like already to relocate the place of worship, which is the prayer area, from the first floor to the second floor, which is pretty much same exact area, 930. But instead of having different rooms for the prayer area, we'll have already an open concept space for the prayer area. But it's the same exact area. We are not adding more prayers to the building. What we would like already to add to the building, it's a community center. We add an office area, and we showed that in the main floors. We added a gym, multi-purpose hall. We added a commercial kitchen to be rented already to external supplier. We added a donation area, which it's needed already to support the community. We added a funeral place, which is not before. This services we showed already as extension in the first floor. This is what we are seeing. It's employment. Our client, with the owner already of the building, which is non-profit organization, they would like already to add between 14 to 20 people working in this building, which we are seeing it's employment. It's support already the core employment zoning, what the city has implemented back to 2013. And this is why we are saying that to have this building as it's not supposed to be in this place, because the city adapted already the core employment strategy already for this area. It's not right, because our building with the addition, it's supporting already the core employment. We are adding around 20 people working in a full-time spaces. These people will be supervisors, people working already in the funeral space, people working already in the kitchen area to support already the gym and multi-purpose hall. If you can see our plan, it supports this. Our review already with with the community planning and letter, which to refuse already the project, it shows already that we need already around 219 parking spaces. Right now, we have existing 60 parking spaces, half of the building, because we, as I mentioned to you, we are not adding any more prayers already to the building. It's the same exact number, same exact space, but only to relocate it from first floor to the second floor. Right now, we don't have any issue already with the parking space. And I explained that by a design intent report to the city to explain what is the purpose for the building, because I got already a recommendation from the city in the beginning, from Candice, that they are not understanding what is the purpose of the building, how we are operating, how the parking is working, because they are not understanding what is the place of worship for a Muslim people. I prepared an extensive report for them to explain where the prayer is coming. They are coming already 5 times per day, each time around 10 minutes to 15 minutes maximum. And the people is attending the pray every time, just like around 10, 15 people only. The peak time, it's Friday. We have it already in 2 prayers between 1:30 to 2:30 and from 3:30 to 4:30. And why we are doing 2 prayers? Because we want already to make sure that we don't have any issue already with the parking. By the way, we signed an agreement already with Toronto Police to manage and control the parking during Friday's prayers, which we are seeing that this is a big time for prayers coming already to pray in the building. And we don't have any issue. And we showed already to the city all support documents and photos that the police is there controlling the building, because we don't want to have any issue already for the parking. The thing that this building is pretty much during the week, it's vacant. No cars are there, no people are there. Because as I mentioned, it's very limited time for the people to pray in the building. And this is why we want already to get the maximum use of the building. We want already to add more services for the community, which is a growing community already. Around the building, there is lots of condo buildings building and adding already more people already to Scarborough. And part of these people, they are Muslim religion, which they are asking the mosque all the time already to add services, just like a Quran school. People want already to bring their kids already to learn the Quran. But how can we do that with the existing services? We can do that. We need to have a proper space for them. And this is why we propose already this building to add more activities. It's a community activities, not more prayer space. It's more community space. As I mentioned to you, all of this.
Mohammed, you may want to,
employment.
sorry, Mohammed,
Yeah.
to interrupt you, but you've reached your 5 minutes, so you may want to just
Yes.
close it.
Yes. And I would like already to for
ma'am.
the committee panel already to support our submission and give the opportunity for the community really to use this building in a perfect way.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Amy, I will come to you. I have a quick question of Adam, sorry, Mohammed, before it goes. So Mohammed, we're looking at your revised variances, and it appears that variance number 1, 2, and 3 have been eliminated. So I can appreciate the removal of 1 and 2, and you can perhaps rejig or redesign. My question or clarification is related to variance number 3 that you've removed, and variance number 4, which is pretty much the same, except one is under the old bylaw and one's under the new bylaw. Can you tell me why variance 3 has been eliminated?
Yeah, but because we are seeing it's the same related already to the same comments regarding the number of parking spaces, which we explained already to the planning department already for the city as well, that the 60 parking spaces in the existing one, it's way enough. And even the calculation for the city made their calculation based on extensive calculation already for the building for the parking.
No, my question is not that. I'm not asking you for justification of reduced parking. My question is, variance number 3 falls under the new bylaw. You remove that, and then under the old bylaw, you still need that variance. So I'm just trying to I'm trying to understand why one was removed and the other is still there.
Yeah, but because we thought already that it's same comments regarding the number of parking spaces already for the same application.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Member M, you have a question.
If I may, I think the confusion here, unfortunately, Madam Chair, is that the applicant here is an architect and not a planner, and therefore actually doesn't fully understand the applications of the zoning bylaw. This was done through the zoning review, and they have identified, based on the plans that were submitted, that he is deficient in these parking spaces. And his rationale is that this is not worship space, this is not prayer space, but it doesn't matter. They look at total floor space, GFA. It doesn't matter if it's meant to be a school or it's meant to be a kitchen. These are all supportive of the primary use, which is a place of worship, right? The ownership is a place of worship. And then you have these ancillary sort of other uses that will be done inside using the space. It doesn't matter. Overall, you're seeking an increase in the floor area, the GFA, and that increase is what's triggering all the requested parking variances. So unfortunately, if we were to remove all the variances as requested by Mohammed, he still won't get a building permit because they're going to still look at the application the same exact way. So we have before us a little bit of a stalemate where Mohammed sees this as not being applicable because the space is not being used for prayer, whereas the actual application of planning policy and regulation doesn't interpret it that way. So I think before us, the committee members, we have to just take what we have before us as the evidence, despite what Mohammed is using as his justification. Do we feel that the expansion of this building is appropriate? And as such, if it is appropriate, do we feel that the reduction in the parking stall sizes and the parking stall spaces is appropriate? That's really what we need to focus on here, not what the actual new space is going to be used for.
I hear you, Member M, and I think in defense, I would say that this applicant was trying to justify based on the functionality of the building. Me and you know, we know how the regulations are made, we know how the zoning's done, right? It's based on the GFA, and that's what is triggering, or that's how the parking is calculated. But in his defense, what he was trying to demonstrate was that this is the function of the building and this is what I need. So we have to give everyone an opportunity, regardless of their understanding or not, an opportunity to speak and defend their application. So I think that's what he was, so that, I think we need to give room to everyone to be able to defend their position.
And I agree. That's why I was just trying to answer the question that you were previously
No,
asking him.
I was not asking the question. My question was, there are two same variances, one under the new bylaw and one under the old bylaw. I was just trying to understand why is one eliminated and the other not. That's all I was asking.
Because he doesn't understand. And my answer was because I don't think he fully understands the application.
That's okay. That's okay. We shouldn't be judging people right now. What's before us is what we're looking at. So I still don't have my answer, but that's okay. Let's move.
So one more thing is that in addition to, despite the occupation of the space or what have you for whatever uses, even the uses he had said still don't seem to comply with the OP because they're still considered sensitive uses.
Correct.
Like a daycare is still a sensitive use. A school is still a sensitive use. And that was the main concern of city planning, was that, yes, this place of worship is permitted right now in a non-conforming situation, a legal non-conforming situation. But adding an expansion to the building is requesting an increase or intensification of that non-conforming use to uses that are still sensitive, that are not allowed currently by the official plan designation.
We all have our own opinion on legal non-conforming uses. There are case laws that go in a different direction as well, and they do allow modernization and intensification of a use. However, each case has to be looked at differently. We're not doing a planning exercise right now, but I have read the community planning staff report, and I do acknowledge all those comments. Now, coming back to the actual application, you started off, Member M, with your comments. Anybody else who has any comment or question for Mohammed at this time? Member Saeed, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mohammed. You were trying to elaborate about the actual use of this building. I have a question. You have 60 parking, which apparently is a good number as far as the routine prayers are concerned. But going back to, you said you have two congregations on Friday. I just wanted to know like how big those congregations are and what is the parking requirement at that time?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the question. It's a very important question because, as I mentioned, Friday prayer, this is the big time. Actually, most of the prayers, they are living nearby and they are coming already by walking already to the building. A few people is coming by cars. And as I mentioned to you, the parking spaces, what we have right now, it's a sufficient. And we have Toronto police, they are controlling the parking. And they are telling people not to park if it's already occupied and it's full. But most of the people, they are coming around the building by walk. And can I explain one thing as well for because Amy mentioned already Quran school. I would like already to explain one thing regarding Quran school. Quran school is not means a school. It's just like 1 hour to 1 hour and a half after schools several times per week for the kids to come and read Quran with the teacher. It's not a full-time school. And this is why I mentioned already from the beginning that we put already design intent to explain what is the purpose of the building. I received a call in the beginning of this submission for the city as a pre-consultation because they didn't understand what is the building. And I put already extensive design intent for them to explain what is the building. So there is some confusion about the activities, what we have there. Is the building just like it's a full-time occupied by cars or not? But pretty much during the whole entire week, there is no cars there. It's very empty parking. And this is why we are thinking that even the 60 parking, it's way enough for the services what we have right now and the future ones.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Okay, I see we have a registered speaker in support. Can we have Mr. Abdul Bala?
Through the chair, this person hasn't logged in today.
Okay, thank you very much. We need to move on. All right, so coming back to Muhammad Abdul Latif, you've made your case. We have heard you. You've also heard comments from our panel members. Before I take the matter into committee members, and anybody else who has a question? I see none. Okay. Let's move into the committee. So Mohammed, we're going into committee now and we will deliberate and make a decision on this application. Okay, thank you for your time. Now, committee members. Gary, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and it's just a clarification as we go into a committee. So I take it that variances 4 and 5 are still on the table, outstanding. Those both relate to parking. The number 5 relates to accessible parking spots, of which there are to be none. So that's my understanding first, right? Those are the two variances that are still alive.
That's a very good question, Gary. And I think if you don't mind, if the committee members allow me, I just need to get that clarification from staff or with the applicant. That the revised notice is what we should be looking at?
That's correct. Okay. That's currently the amended application is currently before you. So whatever decision the committee makes, it would be whatever the decision as amended, based on what is in the supplementary agenda, the revised list of variances.
Perfect. And that amendment came from the applicant?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So Gary, that's the answer. So we have to look at the amended application, which was on the supplementary agenda, the notice that eliminated variants 1, 2, and 3. So we're only dealing with variants 4 and 5. Muhammad, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the variances, whether these were 5 before and now it's amended only variance number 4 or 5, whatever. So all the variances have become because of the parking issues, right? I wonder if the staff can advise if this application has been looked into by the transportation services, because all these are parking variances.
That's a good question. Staff, was this circulated to transportation?
All committee of adjustment applications are circulated to transportation services.
And there was no comment received, I'm assuming, otherwise it would have formed part of the package.
That's correct. So, yes, that's correct.
So to Mohammed, to your question, the application certainly was circulated. There's no comment memo from transportation related to related to parking. But we do have a community planning staff report that is actually advising us that the expansion of the use is not permitted. And parking is a sort of a result of that expansion. But in sort of from an OP perspective, this is, in their opinion, it's not permitted. Mr. Mohammed, and then Amy, and then Gary. So Mohammed, Amy, and Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this is after getting confirmed that this has been looked into by the transportation section, and there are no report on that. So assuming that this was the transportation services may not be having any objections on that. So keeping in view all those backgrounds, and especially when the applicant was mentioning about the usage of the facility, which is, of course, it's a unique nature and the timings are different. I feel that those were quite valid rationales or justifications for these variances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Member M, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, while you could make that assumption, Mohammed, that they don't have an issue or they don't object, I kind of read it into that they've seen community planning recommending refusal, and therefore they feel that there's no need to, because they're hoping that we would take community planning's professional advice and go with that refusal as well. That's my take to it, but I mean, it could go either way.
Yeah, Member M, I may not 100% agree with you. Each department looks at it individually based on their mandate and their portfolio. It could be, but it could not be. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, it could be, it could not be. I'm just giving the flip side of the coin. We don't know, but I do think there is a possibility that Mohammed's right, and there's a possibility that he's not. So I just wanted to be the devil's advocate on that aspect.
Thank you. We had Gary first. So Gary, and then Member McCauley.
Yes, just putting the parking issue aside for the moment. I mean, we're dealing here, right, with industrial employment kind of district, and those are always sensitive issues. So I presumably we've got a legal non-conforming use going on, but if it's going to be increased, then I think our planning staff are correct in saying, you know, hey, is the intent and purpose of the official plan being met? And staff, and I would agree with them on that issue, is that it would not be. So
I agree, Gary.
That's fine, Madam Chair. Yeah.
Okay, all right. No, that's good comment. Member McCauley.
Thank you. I'm just going to add this to the applicant's understanding of his application. The existing use, for all intents and purposes, is place of worship as a parking standard. The place of worship that he wants to add, different uses, community use, kitchen, whatever, and that can be considered as not the same parking standard as the existing religious services. However, the zoning bylaw doesn't deal with them as separate uses. They deal with them as all one use within the building. If this was a mosque, it would have a parking standard. That parking standard is general to all places of worship, but it may be because of the particular configuration and use of the mosque that the parking standard of other places of worship doesn't fit. So the way we deal with that is we ask the applicant to get a parking study of his use and similar uses. And there are a number of mosques in Scarborough that have a number of uses. The one on Nugget and Markham Road, for example, has place of the worship. Is the use, should the use be increased in size? And the official plan from the city says no, they're discouraging it. And the second one, is there enough parking? And we don't have enough information because our standard information is we need 259 parking spaces. If the applicant says there's less, provide a study that can be justified and show us that there is less. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Member Macaulay, for your comments. If there are no further comments, can I please have a motion? Member M, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, I recommend a refusal of the application as amended. And I don't believe we need to tie that to anything.
Okay, all right. May I have a seconder, please? Member
Madam Chair.
Gary. Mhm.
Madam Chair, I second that motion to refuse the application.
All in favor of this motion? All opposed? Oh, sorry. All in favor of this motion? Can I see your hands, please go up? Okay. So in favor are Member M, Member Gary, and Member Macaulay. All opposed? Member Said opposes it. The application, the motion is carried and the application has been refused. Thank you. Okay. This brings us to the end of the agenda for the morning session.
Through the chair, we will, I'm assuming the panel wants a break.
Yes, please.
A recess. How long does the panel wish to have as a recess?
How many minutes of a break? Half an hour?
30 minutes, 30 minutes.
30 minutes. Okay, so we have.
So we will reconvene at 3:15 p.m.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so for those of you listening and tuned in, 3:15, we resume.
Yes.
Excuse me, just one. I just want to check, Katrine, do we need to change streams or not? So, what will the stream be that viewers will need to go on? Okay. So for members viewing on the YouTube stream, when we return at 3:15, please access the YouTube stream for Scarborough Committee of Adjustment hearing PM2 stream. PM Part 2, sorry. If you're on WebEx, you can stay.